Today, Sigma have announced two new lenses for their I series range. There's the Sigma 90mm f2.8 DGDN and also a 24mm f2 DGDN. In a few weeks' time, I'll be taking a look at the 24mm lens and putting it against some of its closest rivals, but for now, I've managed to get my hands on an early copy of this new 90mm lens to see how this thing handles. As with all of Sigma's other I series lenses, this new 90mm lens is small, lightweight and super high quality. Despite being built entirely from metal, its small frame means that the weight is only 365 grams or 12.9 ounces. And in turn, this means that this lens is suitable for both full frame and APS-C camera bodies. Now, although in this video I'll only be testing this lens on my full frame Sony a7 Mark III, interestingly enough, when mounted to an APS-C camera, this lens would be the full frame equivalent of a 135mm, which we all know is a brilliant focal length for portrait photography, so that might just spark some interest in APS-C photographers. Now, falling in line with previous I series releases, this new lens follows the same kind of design and build with an MF to AF switch, textured metal focus dial, and also a manual aperture ring that can be set to auto mode to function just like a regular lens. Oh yeah, and don't forget the fancy magnetic lens cap. The manual focus ring on this thing is buttery smooth and operates without any noticeable lag, meaning that it's great for refining critical focus or capturing focus pulls in video mode. Although the lens body doesn't have any dust or splash proofing, there is a rubber seal around the lens mount to help prevent crap getting into your camera, which is always a bonus. On release day, this lens will be priced at £549 or $669, meaning that it's certainly not a cheap lens. So let's just hope that when it comes to image quality tests later on in this video, this thing proves to be well worth the asking price. Needless to say, this lens works flawlessly with Sony's IAF and face detection, and when shooting in good lighting conditions, the AF is able to snap between near and far objects without any hesitation. In low light conditions, although the AF speed did slow down a little bit, it still managed to lock on without any signs of hunting. When taking pictures of our glamorous assistant George walking towards the camera while shooting wide open at f2.8, the lens did a very good job of keeping locked onto George's face, and the vast majority of the shots I was left with were tack sharp and in focus, with only one or two of the shots being very marginally soft. Switching over to video mode and repeating this test, the lens was able to track George walking towards the camera at a fast pace with no issues at all, even when shooting wide open at f2.8. As for AF noise, other than a very subtle purring noise, this thing is generally very quiet. This lens also copes with flaring pretty well. Although there is a small amount of ghosting and some artifacting, the results are generally pretty minimal. Plus, the lens comes packaged with a nice solid metal lens hood anyways, which should further reduce the effects of flaring in harsh lighting conditions. There's even more good news for videographers, as focus breathing really isn't an issue with this lens either. For bokeh fanatics, unfortunately the bokeh balls this thing creates just aren't that perfect. Although it produces nice round orbs in the center, they rapidly turn into misshapen cat's eye shapes across the rest of the frame. As for general bokeh quality, it does actually produce quite a nice soft background blur. Now obviously you can't expect the defocused area to be quite as thick as it would be with an f1.8 or f1.4 prime, but for an f2.8 lens, I think it produces a very pleasing result. Over to the lens chart now, and when shooting wide open f2.8, there is a small amount of pincushion distortion at the edges of the frame, though nothing to be that concerned about. At the center of the chart, the lens is fairly sharp. It's not the sharpest lens I've ever tested, but still pretty good, with a good amount of contrast and no signs of fringing. At the corners, the results are impressively good, with a level of sharpness that's equal to the center of the frame, and again, no signs of fringing at all. Although not a macro lens, this 90mm can focus super close up too, which is a bit of an added bonus. And at this minimum focusing distance whilst wide open, although the results are a little bit more smudgy with a hint of ghosting, it's still a pretty usable result. On our longitudinal chromatic aberration test, the results were unfortunately very colourful, with cyan fringing at the top and red fringing at the bottom of the chart. Now, I know lens charts are enough to give any tech geek a raging hard on, but in my opinion, it's the results it creates out in the field that really matter. Which is a good job really, because luckily for us, this thing delivers lovely looking images with nice amounts of clarity and contrast. Seeing as I'm a big fan of 85mm lenses, this 90mm focal length is very easy to fall in love with, and it creates the same kind of compression that's super flattering for both close-up and full-length portraits. So after spending some time with this lens, what is my overall verdict? Well, quite honestly, it is a really nice little lens, and if having gear that's super small and lightweight is something that is a big deal to you, then this certainly is a nice option to consider. There's no doubt that this new lens is very well built, offers good image quality, and is all wrapped up in a very small and lightweight package. The only real gripe that I have with this lens is that personally I would have liked to have seen it with a wider maximum aperture of f2, and that would have kept it nicely in line with the 24, the 35 and the 65mm lenses, all within Sigma's I series range. But anyway, if you're interested in buying this lens, then as soon as it becomes available, I'll be providing both UK and US Amazon links in the description below. Any purchases made using those links does give us a small kickback and really goes a long way to supporting the channel, so thank you in advance for using those links. Also, be sure to let me know what you think about this new lens in the comments section below. The guys at Sigma tell me that they do actually read the comments that you leave, so be sure to let them know your thoughts. I imagine some of you will be leaving comments along the lines of, "Dear Sigma, please stop pissing about making small lenses that obscure focal lengths and just hurry the f*** up and release an updated DGDN version of your 135mm f1.8 lens. Yours kindly, every portrait photographer ever." And send.